Trustee Strachan and Trustee Thorne send their regrets, and I'm sure about Trustee Souza. He's here. Trustee Souza, welcome. I'd like to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the lands of the Halkomenem speaking people, specifically the Quamitsun village. The Board of Education is honored to be able to collaboratively walk beside the Quatsin, Malahat, Sabasset, Galalp, Penelakut, Manus, and Liaxin peoples who have cared for this land for thousands of years. May we walk gently on the ceded and unceded territories of their lands as we work together to lift up all our Halkomenem. Welcome. Adoption of the agenda. Trustee Schmidt, Trustee Lise, all in favor? Motion carried. Adoption of the Board of Education and Business Committee adopts the minutes of the April 23rd, 2024 Board of Education and Business Committee. Trustee Lise, Trustee Schmidt, all in favor? Motion carried. Action list, nothing. Petitions and delegations. We have, what's up first? Alexander School. Welcome. Ah, there it is.
Hi, everyone. Antha Ann Kissinger. I am the principal at Alexander Elementary. And before we begin today, we have invited 5 students. We want to kind of take you into the day in the life of Alexander. And we start every day with our native announcements. And as we go through our native announcements, a lot of our school goals and the things that we're working on are naturally embedded in our native announcements. So take it away, team.
Native announcement, and we'll give you a few moments before we begin our native announcements. I need to see it, yeah, Anta Berna.
Anta Ren, Anta Chelsea, and Anta Jonah, Anta Monica. We are proud to acknowledge that we are sharing our school story together today on the unceded traditional tongue of the Cowichan Mistima. Sequence that Equinam, that means please listen. In our morning announcements, I talk about our messaging for each day of the week. Each day has a theme about our Wolfpack and social emotional learning, which are Mindful Monday, Teamwork Tuesday, Wolfpack Wellness Wednesday, Thankful Thursday, and Fun Fitness Fridays. As a part of our social emotional learning goal at school, each day we share our gratitude attitude theme for the day in Halkomenem. Achka Ata I met Squirrel, which means we are thankful for this beautiful day.
We acknowledge our Wolfpack birthdays each day by saying it is Squirrel and Squirrel to our friends and staff members. We also share a joke each day and a positive phrase to end our messages. Our joke of the day is, what do mermaids sleep on?
I don't know, what do mermaids sleep on?
Waterbed.
Mrs. Kissinger, Gervin will now share our school goals with you.
Good job to everybody.
And we're finished. Just kidding.
These are our superstars who start the day every single morning with Halkomenem, and it feels like they are waking up our school, and it's just an awesome time of the day that we end often on a laugh, or Miss Gervin chooses many corny jokes, but it's a wonderful thing. We're good. Okay, so we are located on the unceded traditional summit of the Cowichan Mistima. We have 298 learners at our school across 15 divisions. This year, 68% of our SMNM have Indigenous ancestry, and 7% of our learners are new to Canada. We have a really, really culturally rich school. Our strengths at our school. Our students are positive, they're accepting, they're cooperative and kind. But this year we've also been really working on the fact that our kids are learners. And we've been trying to build on those attributes and remind them all of that each and every day. Our learners are full of wonder, they're organized, they're leaders, and they are focused. In our recent grade 4 student learning survey, our grade 4, 78% of them that said they always feel welcome at our school, and that's compared to the district average of 49%. So our kids are feeling welcome and feeling like our school is the right place for them to be. This is just a picture of one of our students. This was some of the work that was done in the month of September for reconciliation. So our stretches. At Alexander, we are working on 3 main goals. We are working on literacy, social emotional learning, and Indigenous knowledge and perspectives. These are some of our students working on their literacy. So this year, we benefited greatly from applying for a collaboration grant that allowed us to focus on our literacy initiatives. We also benefited greatly from working alongside a district coordinator of literacy. This year, in the heat of August, Ms. Gervin and I made the exciting decision to drive all of our timetables by reading groups. No longer would they be driven by PE blocks or library blocks, they would be driven by our reading groups. So we had a fantastic opportunity to pull in EAs, LA teachers, resource teachers, administrators, and classroom teachers. And we have 13 divisions doing 4 times a week Tier 2 literacy intervention at our school. And just to add a little bit more about literacy, we also threw in a book a day in the month of May. And so students did book reviews that we did on our announcements each day. And kids were super excited to hear books that they had heard back in kindergarten or grade 2, and kids talking about them and reviewing them. This is another one of our little learners, but it's alongside a year-long comparison of growth that we've seen in a grade 3 classroom. Sometimes when we see red, maybe we get a little bit discouraged, but we've really stopped to take a moment and really look at what the red means. And so for some of our learners in the fall, maybe they were reading 4 words per minute fluently, but right now in spring, they're reading 29 words per minute fluently. So really celebrating those movements and the growth and the hard work that all of our kids are doing. Another goal that we've been working on is social emotional learning. And this is Ms. Teal's wonderful grade 1 class who is knocking it out of the park as they talk about friends. We have had a beautiful, beautiful crossover this year in all of our subcommittees. We've done a lot of work in PLC on our school goals, and then when we've met as mental health committees, there's been crossover there again. And when we've worked in our other subgroups, there's continuous crossover. So everyone seems really, really rooted in the work that what we're doing and why we're doing it. We've really worked on student leadership, having students be the voices in the morning, our students being the voices at assemblies, and really listening to what students would like to be doing within our school. We've built a social emotional focused bulletin board. We have an opportunity for students to do shout outs across the school. So if they're really excited by a lesson that they had, or they really want to tell a teacher how much they mean to them, they get to do these big shout outs on the board, or even just reaching out to friends. We're also really big at celebrating our wolf pack. It means a lot to us to have a sense of belonging for staff and for students. So we take time to make sure we're celebrating being positive, accepting, cooperative, and kind, but also having times to celebrate who we are as a school. Here's Monica again, doing our welcoming messages every morning. And as I already mentioned, this is that important work of making sure that we're hearing Ho'okaminum, the first thing we hear in the morning as we wake up our school, but it's also been an opportunity to celebrate diversity and inclusion within our school. We've been able to talk about Mental Health Week, Kindness Week, Moose Hide Campaign, Red Dress, a variety of things for our school.
I would just like to say how grateful I am to be here today and just give a little special shout out to the Hahas Manapalani for their voices. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about our final goal of Indigenous worldview and perspectives in the classroom. We are very lucky to have a Halkidino language and cultural advisor at our school, along with our grade 7 Southton. And we have 2 Indigenous support workers that help support students and families. And we go above and beyond that work to ensure that everybody's circling back, and our parents are just as part of our pack as our kids. So for us, that community and connections is a really big, important part of our work. This is a lovely picture I just wanted to share with you. This was our first performance of the year. We were invited down to a first salmon ceremony. The students were really, really excited about that. And you can see Stuart's mom in the background filleting a fish. And those of you who are familiar with Ken Elliott, one of our knowledge keepers that comes on our land-based days, which I'm going to chat about in a second. Sit down.
Anyone?
To the right.
We are really, really proud to bring back Zinkwa Dance and performing this year at our school. Post-COVID, it was very difficult to gather students together to come to the gym. And right now, we have about 35 dancers that meet with Robert George on Wednesdays, and they come in and they practice and they dance, and they are getting better and better and being offered many opportunities. So part of that cultural work is learning regalia protocol, and part of Claudia's work, our HLCA, she comes in during that time. That's part of her teaching time to teach the students the cultural etiquette and protocol around what it means to be a Zinkwa dancer. That is a huge part of our social emotional learning for many of our students. And the question, what it means to my identity to be a Zinkwa dancer, I just wanted to share a little story. We do surveys with our grade 5, 6s about our school and about our land-based days and students' backgrounds. And this year, one of our kids said, "I'm Kwamachan." And so for us, and she's a really, really awesome Zinkwa dancer. And 2 years ago, because she's in grade 6 this year, and last year she had that same survey, I think she just left that answer blank. And so this year for her to say, "I'm Kwamachan," that really speaks to her personal and cultural identity and just how proud and positive she feels about herself. And part of that, of course, is giving back to our community and serving our elders and honoring the land. So here's a cute little photo that Anne could not help but take of our friend Kelsey. So cute. Going back to the protocol and elders' guidance, these are kind of our common themes that we have found through doing those surveys with our grade 5, 6s over the last 2 years. Some fun facts, 60% of these 5, 6s find land-based days enjoyable and valued. 73% value bone game opportunities, so we've been really fortunate to have bone game sets at our school and invite knowledge keepers to come in to do bone game. And I just wanted to do a little tidbit to the numeracy framework that's coming out. We had a lovely PLC group this year in our staff that got together with our Indigenous Education Department to make a math trolley that we are really excited to be using Indigenous worldview and knowledges within math and connecting to that numeracy framework. So that was really exciting. Yeah. And then just chatting a little bit finally about our land-based learning. Like I said, our ISWs go above and beyond, and here's Gary Johnny. Is that you, Jonah, in that picture? I think it might be, watching Gary fillet a fish that we caught down at the river in the fall. And this is one of our grade 7 learners who has been spearfishing with Gary for 3 seasons. And this year he spearfished, he got a fish, like with the big giant spear. And it was an amazing experience. And when we were talking about land-based days, he actually said, "Yeah, catching that fish, that was great." So I just wanted to give a little shout out to him, just to show just how valuable that is for that student and for what's happening around our school, outside of school.
So that's just a bit about Alexander and some of the work that we are doing this year, and I hope you can feel how excited and how proud Kelly and I are to speak about our school. It's a really wonderful place with wonderful hahasmadam. So hi Tsepka to all of you. Is there any questions that you have for us or our fabulous learners?
Trustees, Elizabeth. Sorry, trustee.
You can call me Elizabeth. I'd be curious from the morning team, do your friends ever ask you to make announcements, or do they give you jokes that they'd like you to share? Do they give you any input?
Not really, but some of our friends, they come in and tell Miss Gerwin and Miss Kissinger one of their jokes that they have.
Okay. So you get it. So do people tell you when they enjoy your morning announcements? Yeah? Oh, that's really nice. One more. when you're making up your messages, what kinds of things how do you decide what you're going to share that morning?
I don't know, we just think about it and then we all kind of agree on those things.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Isaac.
Your Ominum language is very good and very smooth. And so, is there something that you love about learning or that you share with your families? Sometimes, sorry, you share?
I told him the jokes.
You do. That's wonderful. And do you speak to your family in Hokkien?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. That's wonderful.
When she gives those food, I tell her I age group didn't see
That means thank you for the food, Grandma.
Trustee Schmidt.
This was the staff. Thank you so much for opening up a door and giving us a peek inside of your beautiful school. I feel honored that I got to go there a couple times this year and watch your kiddos at play and see how happy inside your door really is when I've been there. So thank you for sharing your story. And to you guys, I want to say thank you for coming here today, because I know how hard it is when there's a whole bunch of adults sitting around staring at you, right? and that just shows that you're really, really strong. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your strength and your leadership with all of us, because it's really important for us to hear from you guys, because you guys are the reason why we're here today. So thank you for being here, and thank you for being so brave and showing your leadership, and keep going. It sounds like you're doing amazing things in your school. Good job, you guys.
I've got a couple questions. The students, how does being on the leadership help your learning?
We usually get to help kids and then
Does it make you feel better doing this and then going to school every day? My second question is, can you tell us a joke?
what do you call a man with no body and nose? Nobody knows.
That was great. Thank you very much for coming.
Well done.
And next up, we have Nicole Cobble Hill.
Donc, bonjour tout le monde, on va parler un petit peu en français au commencement. Je m'appelle Ian Zibber, je suis le directeur de l'école Cobble Hill depuis septembre 2023. My name is Ian Zibber and I've been the principal at the École Cobble Hill since September 2023. We have some community members I would love to introduce who are with us today to help support. First off, we have Grant Mellenstram, who's our vice principal. At the back, we have Aaron Aerosmith, who is a grade kindergarten 1 teacher. And we have two kindergarten students, Teague and Jamie Wrightson, who are with us with their mom, Isla Cameron, who happens to be an educator at our school, teacher at school. We have James Holloway with his mother, Ava, with us today, and we want to welcome them and thank you for being here to support us and participating in this venture. Before we start, we as well would like to do a territorial land acknowledgement, and we've invited James. Just a little background story about how this came about is that previous to me arriving at Cobble Hill, Grant had been practicing with the students in assembly format, but also in classrooms, going over the territorial acknowledgement all in Halkomelem and having the students repeat after me style. So a lot of our kids have been quite competent, and we find that accessing a second language such as French makes it a lot easier for students to access other languages. So I welcome James and thank you.
Je veux reconnaître que nous sommes ici sur les territoires traditionnels des peuples qui parlent Halkomelem. I want to acknowledge that we are here today on the non-ceded territories of the people who speak Halkomelem. Thank you.
So just to go over a little bit of the scope of our presentation, we'll start with our story, our learners, and our strengths, and then I'll turn it over to Grant about our stretches and a little bit surrounding our goals. Our story. Well, École Cobble Hill is a single-track K-7 French immersion school. It's in a beautiful rural setting if you haven't been there, close to forest trails and beaches. And fittingly enough, it's the address or the street name is called Learning Way, if you didn't know, so I thought it was pretty fitting. And it's a beautiful oasis located in Cobble Hill. It's a very strong sense of community and family within our school, and we're very proud of our children and our families and what they're able to accomplish. This image here is a recent image of our Young Entrepreneurs Fair that took place at our school a few weeks ago. You can see the smiley faces and the excitement on the kids. They just big joy participating in this event at our school. It's a tradition. Our learners. Currently, we have 362 enrolled at our school. Approximately 11% of those students are self-identified as Indigenous, but more importantly, a large percentage of those students are Métis. We have approximately 16% of our students that are English language learners, which means that the first language spoken at home is not English, and so they come to school accessing French as well, and also have the ability to learn English at school. Our students bring many talents and gifts to our school, and of course, as you probably know, as being a French immersion school, we immerse ourselves in speaking French within the confines of our building throughout the entire day. We give them a break at recess time, but for the most part, kids are continuously speaking French, and this is modeled through our expert teachers who lead by example and speak French to our students on a daily basis, and their language acquisition skills is quite good, but we'll talk a bit more about that in just a second. I enjoy some of these comments because this is some of the feedback from our students with regards to our school and our strengths. So when asked our students about, what would you say about our school strengths, our school encourages us to show kindness, empathy towards others. In addition to that, our school has many clubs, extracurricular activities, which include robotics, math club, chess club, rainbow club, and a variety of sports. Our school has a beautiful forest that is often remembered by many students that have moved on past grade 7 and constantly talk about the brilliance of having a forest close by, which they enjoy and love, and we have to take that opportunity to learn in that space as well. And our teachers are nice, and they're kind, and they like to do a lot of fun things in class. Great.
All right. So hello, my name is Grant, good to see you all. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the data that we've collected at the school. As you can see, we have a very high satisfaction rate with the students at the school. Stats themselves, 95% feel safe, 94 feel welcome, 97 like, and we score particularly for the grade 4s and the grade 7s. So we're really pleased with the level of comfort and just overall them feeling welcome at school. We're also very committed to equity and inclusion, particularly for French immersion because it is a school of choice. And the parents choose for their students to come to École Cobble Hill, particularly through the lottery system, but we make sure that we accommodate every learning style that we can in the school, particularly for learning French as a second language. Over the course of the year, during our PLC time, we've what's the word? Dove deep into the data. Particularly, this is from our report card data, and our two goals at the school are oral language and writing competencies. And this was from the report cards in the fall, and we really feel that you'll see our stretches here. A number of the students, particularly for oral language, are still, even though 42%, 57% is pretty decent, we would still like to be a bit higher, particularly with the students who were affected during COVID. We really noticed that a lot of the literacy skills at the school suffered, particularly in the primary grades, when the kids were at home, because the parents don't speak French. So we've really had to sort of dig deeper with regards to our commitment to enhancing the oral language competencies at school. So you'll see some of the stretches there. And also for writing as well, you'll see here highlighted, particularly in the primary grades, again, we're really making a strong commitment to improving the writing skills with the students. Again, you'll see in the primary grades, particularly when it comes to French, during those months at home, really took a toll on them with regards to their engagement in the language. And we're really making a strong commitment to maintaining our focus on writing. So those are our stretches. In our last PLC, which was a couple weeks ago, we dove deep into the data from the report cards and also the learning dashboard, and the staff is committed to following the same goals for the next year, commitment to oral language and also improving writing across the grades K to 7. So what do we do about that? Here are some of the activities we've done. Particularly with regards to oral language, we have our annual concours competition. And if you're not aware, Mount Provo and Cobble Hill, we combine the schools, and we have students sort of celebrate the French language through oral speaking. These are some of the kids in the center here. You'll see James there again. Hear the story. This was at Cobble Hill. We hosted the students, and the students that finished first went on to the provincial competition in Vancouver and celebrated again, which is run by the Canadian Parents for French. So we're really stoked about that kind of opportunity for the kids to celebrate their language. These are examples of some of the primary activities, and we also bring in, through Art Starts, bilingual presentations for the kids to really celebrate the joy of the French language. This was it Snow White? No, it was Cinderella. That's right. Or Cendrillon. And in celebration of that as well, to support our oral language K to 3, we had a mini concours for the kids, for the kindergarten to grade 3. It was right up to grade, wasn't it, Ayla?
Up to grade 4.
Yeah, and so we had kindergarten students come up and celebrate that. So it was really great. And it was over 2 sessions in the gym, and this one's very funny. They talked about a poem here. She had a rock stuck in her shoe. That's why her leg's up. But so they really had a chance, the whole school had a chance to engage in the oral language, which is one of our school goals. And with regards to writing, this is a picture of my classroom here, and you'll see the sticky notes on the desk. What we find is that as students get into the older grades, they need specific targeted instruction about pronunciation of certain words. So what I do in class here is that they read their books in French, and then they have to target words that, I'll get very specific, they have to end in ENT and also the liaison. So it's a very targeted, specific approach to help improve the oral language. And it also helps us to work on their writing, as most of the intermediate classes are working on the district-wide write this week. So oral language and writing, those are our focuses. And yeah, we're just really proud to be part of this community. Ian and I have had a great time this year. To be in a functionally bilingual school. I love speaking French, I love being part of the language, and we really look forward to maintaining these festival goals as we move forward, and yeah, just make it part of just our daily instruction and really the focus of who we are. So in that, I'll stop talking, and we're going to get the kids to talk now. So we're going to do a little demonstration. So Aaron Aerosmith is here, and we're going to do a little demonstration of some oral language activities that the kids do in kindergarten. This is Jamie and Teague, and James is going to help lead the lesson, and you'll see some of the activities that they do. Now, I must apologize, and I tell this to Isla every time.
I don't know who's who. I could
Jamie. He is in my class, in kindergarten grade 1 class, and he is in a straight kindergarten class, and we always start in kindergarten with our letters. So we just thought we'd let Jamie and Teague work with James to say their letter sounds.
Alors, et A.
C'est pour acrobat.
Et pour J.
C'est pour descendre. Deux.
Et pour I.
C'est pour souris.
Et finalement R.
C'est pour rougir.
And then after we get to, from our letters, we start learning our high frequency sight words, because before we can start reading and writing in our second language, we really need to learn the words first. So I have 9 different sets of sight words, so 90 words in total if they get through them by the end of grade 1. And we start off with the ones in, Jamie? East. Rouge. Don't.
Regard. Voici. Le. C'est. Poisson. Lit. Grand. Chat. Papa. Maman. Petit.
C'est la femme. And then eventually by the end of our year, we get to using these words in our writing. That's how it relates to our writing. We learn the oral language first, and then you make a sentence up about your stories. So they'll draw a picture of me and Mom walking in the forest, and they'll write regarde maman et moi. Chose petit comme ça. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Questions, Trustee Schmidt?
Okay, first of all, kindies. You, young gentlemen, were wonderful. Thank you for sharing with us today. And James, thank you very much for coming. Sadly, kindies always get the spotlight. You didn't say it wasn't fair. And thank you for sharing and opening up and showing us inside a cold Cobble Hill and where your kiddos are and what your strengths are and what your stretches are. And I just really appreciate, I know Canadian Parents of French used to be really prominent at board meetings over and over and over again, so we don't really hear or see much of them anymore, so it's nice to hear that.
We started the chapter this year.
Yeah, we restarted the job.
Since Toronto left, it kind of went quiet.
So
Right.
a chapter that's just started.
Nice, so it's nice to hear that that's rolling again, because I know how important that was.
Yeah, so part of the idea around establishing another chapter within our community is that we want the attrition rates as far as continuing on past grade 7 we want them to be high. So attrition's been low, specifically from our school, and we found that it's a networking piece for parents. They're not really sure where to turn to if they're not speaking to parents in their house. How can we find additional supports that can help us? Who can we connect with within our community? There are other parents under it that need similar ideas or supports, and so we thought Canadian Parents for French would be a great idea.
Nice. Well done. And it'll be nice to watch that grow again, because
Yeah.
I know several kids that have gone through the French immersion program that have graduated, gone and got their teaching certificates. Well, we know one of them.
And one's at our school.
Yeah, and what's your school? So, I mean, we know that progression really would happen, and I think Canadian Parents of French were a big part of the sports system. So I'm glad they're back. Congratulations.
I just have sort of a question. Is it recommended that kindergarten teachers do additional studies in mime?
15 degree.
Not the singing, we actually just had a PLC for a program called AIM, which uses actions with the vocabulary words to try and use more than one way of learning. So something as teachers we're just learning, and hope to implement it a bit more next year as we get a little better at it. So the teacher might lost a little bit of the actions, but it goes a little bit fast for me as an older learner. So I have to work on it, practice it at home too.
Okay, thank you very much.
Pick a name.
Yeah, it all works.
With regards to AIM, so the last non-instructional day, we brought in an AIM facilitator, and we actually, kids came for a 20 to 30-minute session, non-French speaking children, some with some neurodiversity, and they were able to access the language quite quickly with the use of gestures and narrative, so it was really impressive to see.
I love to see the correlation today between learning Hokaminam and learning French, and where you start with the littles and then how fluent you get as you grow through your school. So I just want to say thank you for what was your words here? Waking up the boardroom to language. Right? So we live in this world of English, but to know that the richness of other languages in our community is flourishing. It's just really wonderful, and I'm just honored to be a part of you today. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming, and before you leave, will you guys tell us a joke?
The kid has to know.
No. Well, thank you very much for coming. We really enjoyed that, and we always look forward to these Tuesdays when we get to do this.
Thank you.
I know, you love it. I know.
Thanks, Deanne.
These are way too.
Thank you, Grant. Nice to see you. Okay. Thank you, Erin. Thank you, everyone. That AIM program, I used to teach that in really stuff, and it is very, it's very great. It's a great program.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm especially for the little ones. I remember that each Thank you.
You guys, have a good rest of your day. Go. Okay, all right.
Up next, we have Mr. Sandquist. Projections.
I was trying to follow that up, Mr. Sandquist.
Oh, he's got his pointer.
Oh, that's not good.
Challenge accepted. We're working through the updated year-end projection as of April 30th, 2024, and the good news is it has doubled from where it was presently. But there are some reasons for that, and some of those reasons are the board's doing through the budget process. So the first reason that our projection has changed quite a bit is our February count is now in, and it was $307,000 above estimate. So those revenues were not accounted for earlier because they were not yet known. So that now adds $307,000 into the surplus. Another area that we've done a little bit better on is in the area of overall salaries. We were pretty close to even on teachers, and right now we think we're going to be about $106,000 ahead. Also, when we look at our replacement costs, so we've had a very good April, and the trend is looking quite good in regards to. No, this doesn't necessarily mean this means our costs are lower. It doesn't necessarily mean our absences may be lower, but our costs are lower in case there's some positions that aren't able to be filled, especially in the education assistance ranks. So that is another item that has increased the surplus as that's trending differently. The board made a couple of decisions in budget. One was to allocate some funding over to the community link from this year's budget. And that is why you see the surplus rising here in this account under education assistance, because we did do that entry in advance of year end. The next area where we see a bigger shift is we made a decision not to move the $250,000 over to the local capital, which was going to be part of a renovation project. So that is now in surplus. So those three big ones that I've just told you about with the community link one, the surplus, and the new revenue is almost $800,000, a little over $800,000 of why it doubles. So we're left with about $300,000 of net change based on just sort of some salary dynamics that are at play. So we are moving into the year end currently with a projection of close to 2.4, which will be added to whatever is remaining in the surplus already. So that is a good spot to be, having gone through a difficult budget. But our trending has changed a little bit since we were in that process. Are there any questions on the surplus projection?
Just a question. So in regards, I know we had to make a difficult decision around EAs. Does this allow any flexibility for some of those positions?
So there's already been a greater number of students with designations identified than what we had in the original budget. And the staffing that is going out now has added back a number of EA positions that are, because there is a relationship between the number of positions and the number of designations. So it is not as significant as the reduction that was made. And the amended budget will reflect that with additional revenues for those students and those costs. So the assignment meeting that is upcoming has an additional 4 education assistant positions in it at this time.
Trustee Schmidt.
So if it has an additional 4, and we know that last year extra testing brought in 12, we might have them all back. There's a possibility, I guess.
Yeah, there's a possibility that we'll be back, looking for another adjustment. It'll be based on what the September enrollment looks like.
Trustee Crawford.
Just reflecting on perhaps the way you stated it, can you just remind us, there is a pretty definite relationship between the funding formula and how many EAs we have, and it isn't necessarily all that arbitrary on the board's part. We do have a structure we have to follow. Could you refresh us on that?
Well, the board we roughly use a ratio of 3 designations to 1 education assistant. And it is rough. There are always needs assessments around that and the types of designations. But if you look historically over the last number of years, you'll find an FTE to student number count approximating 3 to 1. And so seeing these additional designations come in since the time that we submitted in February and developed the budget, we already know that these new students are here. We've already adapted because there's going to be revenue that comes to offset that. And that'll be part of your amended budget process.
Thank you.
And I have another item. Annually, we are required to prepare a multi-year financial plan and submit it to the ministry. I admit that it looks very much like last year's because with the absence of Mike Russell, I took all the exact same photos and the exact same template and updated the information. So some of the photos are not as current as we normally would have. But this is a document that walks through the board's budget process, so the public can see how the board goes about creating the budget. All the timelines are listed here for all the various meetings. Now, this all changed last year, so it's pretty similar to the same process this year that we used last year, and you won't see much change in this document. We talk a little bit about the types of funding that the board has. You have a consolidated budget that brings in the operating fund, special purpose fund, and capital fund, and some examples of what are in those various funds. We then talk about how, this is the interesting part. We're required to align our strategic priorities, and now we know these are evolving and are being developed into a new strategic plan. But how does the budget support those strategic priorities? So we do this in the form of some bullets. And one of the ones that we added here that was part of the board's change to the budget guiding principles is to intentionally target funds towards resources aimed at increasing Indigenous student graduation rates. So you see that now updated in this document because that was a change. And then we put in all the other areas where we see that the budget supports learning, for instance. And then we look at our enrollment trends, and we know this is always dynamic. It's as good as the point that you look at your urge enrollment and project forward. Lots of things can happen. But we are aware of our declining birth rates in the Cowichan Valley for the last 5 years, so we know our kindergarten numbers are not going to be as big as maybe some prior years, and we know that our in-migration numbers have also been quite low, a number of children moving to the valley. And so there we see a relatively stabilizing enrollment. Now this isn't regionalized, this is the entire school district. There are areas where there are more pressures that may be growing faster. In particular, the central area is the area that seems to be more stable than our outside areas in regards to population projections. So not projected to move a great deal in the next few years. And then we have to do this really interesting calculation to try to figure out, well, what is the government going to fund the board in regards to funding rates for the future? So if you're doing a multi-year financial plan, you have to figure out how much revenue you're going to generate. And you can do that by taking those student numbers. We know the grant formula. Then we have to sort of estimate, well, how much we think they're going to fund us for wage increases, and then build it into the block rate. So you see the 89.15 in the third column from the right, that's next year's funding, because they've announced a 24-25. They haven't announced 25-20, I should say 26 is a typo, and they haven't announced 2026-27. So those 2 years, we're having to make a best guess as to what those rates are going to be to build into our formula, and we have quite a complex background spreadsheet on that. I haven't submitted to the ministry yet, so I'll make my amendment to my date. We look at international student program revenue as one of our main contributors. It's pretty much stabilized and is projected to do so, around 150 students a year FTE. Staffing levels, so then we track all the changes to our staffing levels over the year. These are all things that the ministry requires us to have in a plan. So we can look at how many, based on the fact that we're not going up much in the way of enrollment. You don't see teachers really growing between 24-25 to 25-26, 26-27, or really any staff. If our population is stabilizing, so then is our staff. And then those costs are built into the expense estimates. Salaries, we're at the end, coming to the conclusion of a bargaining year. Next November will be the last year. We know that for next year we have a 3% increase that's already been announced. After that, we're into a bargaining cycle. So what does 25-26 and 26-27 look like for wages? That being 90% of the board's expenditures. We don't know. So we have to make assumptions. So we have used the assumption of 2% wages going forward. That yet to be bargained, could be 3%, but that 2% is what we used in the funding rate to come up with the changes from 89.15. So we look at absenteeism costs, and you can see how that's been trending over time. And the reason that it builds in those orange bars is simply the 3%, 2%, and 2% wage increases that are reflective. So we just take the budget, and we have to increase those budgets for wage increases for those employees. But what was once not that long ago $3 million is now up in the $5 million range. So significant cost pressures there. And then we roll that up, we make an estimate around inflation, we've estimated around our wages, we've estimated around our staffing levels, we've estimated around our enrollment, and we come up with this document, which is the multi-year financial plan, where our revenues have all been calculated based on those factors I've just described. You can see that investment income goes down over the years, which is up in that upper section in revenues, because we don't think interest rates are going to hold. I think that is a reasonable expectation, but we do think our wages and such are going to be funded. We have not built in funding for inflation. That still is not a commitment of government to catch up on that 10% of our budget that hasn't had any adjustments to it for 5 or 6 years, I would say. We build in all of our salaries and our benefits. We hold benefits at approximately 26%, that is what our benefit costs are now. 2 years ago, that was 23.5. So think about that as a pressure. That was one of the pressures we dealt with this year, a significant pressure on benefit rates and supplies. So when all that happens, here is where we are at the end of our budget. We brought in $2.5 million. I showed you a surplus projection of about 2.3. So as we move forward, we need 2.8 next year to balance, or 2.9 if we don't make any reductions. We take that off the top. We assume, because budgeting isn't always exactly perfect, maybe we'll get another $1 million in surplus. We end that year at 2.6. But 2 years, the next year, we need 3.2, assuming that government doesn't fund inflation. And we assume another $1 million in surplus, we end that year with 394. So we are coming up to, some very significant challenges in a couple of years.
Trustee Schmidt.
So we haven't seen a huge increase actually we haven't seen much of anything through retirements. And I'm wondering, are you projecting, now that we've gotten so many years into our wage increase, that we may start seeing retirement start to show up? That would bring down our average teacher costs?
The catch to that is that our funding formula has a line item for average teacher salary cost. And so if our salaries decline, so does our funding. And so there isn't really a correlation of savings for a board unless those staff retire after September 30th. So then you have a savings. So in other words, they don't factor into the funding formula. It is based on September 30th data. If somebody retires on October 1st and are replaced by a less expensive individual, somebody lower on the seniority list or on the step list, those savings then come into that year. But if they retired at June 30th, they're part of that already reduced number in September, and we don't get the savings. So there's a catch to it. Yeah, and there's pretty consistent use of absenteeism or sick days across the age group, so there isn't really a savings on that side either. It's not that much. It's not that variable depending on whether you're older or younger.
So I'm sure I'm not the only one that's freaking out about that bottom line there, that last one, just a wee bit anyway. Do we foresee that possibly international may be able to, like, there might be some kind of a push to increase our revenue through international?
Yeah, I think that's work they're always trying to do. There's some limitations around homestay spaces, so that's why you see a billboard on the highway right now. I think that's more of the restrictor than necessarily market, is finding the places for parents or for the families that will receive children. That changed significantly after COVID. So pre-COVID, there were more families willing to participate in the program. Post-COVID, and then with inflation, they're adjusting homestay rates now as well, so that it's become more attractive for families to recover their costs. But that is more of a community limiter.
Interesting. Okay.
Trustee Lisa.
And so in the event that the wage increase is more than 2%, say it's 3.5%, then that number is wiped potentially right off, or what happens if it's...
Well, we're assuming it's funded.
We're assuming it's funded.
So a 3.5% negotiated wage increase, we're going to assume that it's funded.
It's funded, okay.
Now I think, whether it's funded or not is always, depends on the math you use. But assuming it's funded, we would build it into our projection, and our percentage rate would go up on, our funding per pupil rate would go up, accordingly. But what we know is that I think historically government will always fund those unionized collective agreements. We've been very fortunate for the last couple of years to have had the principal, vice principal, and exempt group supported. I don't know that that's a ongoing commitment. That is always a challenge, because those are the wages that if you get a high one, like 3.5%, and you have to apply that to another group without funding, that's been one of the board's past challenges. But they've supported boards in the last 3 years because those percentages have been so high. It was 4%, 6.75, and it's about to be 3. We don't have funding information yet at all on the 3. That is going to come in late in June, and we're well through our budget. So we did a projected estimate of what we thought that funding was going to be, and it was in the $900,000 range. That was a line item we had in our budget revenues. It's going to not be exactly that. It'll be either more or it'll be less. And hopefully we did a good job on projecting.
I have a question.
Oh, Eduardo has one.
Go ahead.
Hey, yep, thank you. And considering, these potential financial challenges over the next couple of years, I'm wondering if you could remind me, when are we going to start talking about the future of Cowichan High School? I'm just thinking about selling it off, or like what potential revenue we could be seeing there to kind of offset or help to address some of this. When are we going to start talking about the various options?
Well, it is in the disposal process. That was done in a public meeting, and that package has been submitted to the ministry for disposal approval. Now, any funding that's received, that's not able to offset operating costs, so it all has to go into capital reserves. But there could be things that we're funding from operating that we could now fund out of those reserves, but they would be minor in nature. Things like software or acquisitions or things that we normally have in our operating budget, but they wouldn't be able to take, say, the proceeds of that school and take a portion of it to offset the expenditure pressures in the operating budget.
It will all go to capital.
Correct, it goes to capital.
Thank you.
I have a question about the costs. Once Cowichan Secondary is no longer used, what's going to cost us per year to keep that thing while we wait for all these processes to go through?
I don't think it's necessary. If it's unoccupied, it would be very, very based on utilities. And with the new school being constructed with sort of LEED Gold standards and LED lighting, probably a net savings actually between those two. You could probably operate both those buildings for less than you could operate just Cowichan Secondary as far as utilities go. So those savings would be used to offset some of the costs around fencing and perimeter security, which we don't have an estimate on that yet, because we haven't yet moved out and figured it out. We know outside here it's about $3,000 for that fencing a year that you see around the parking lot. So we could probably extrapolate that and get a good idea.
So we're not going to see much of a hit while we wait for these processes to go through.
I don't anticipate that. I think the new building is extremely energy efficient, and if the old building is left just in base level utilities with the lights off, and you're just keeping the trickle heat to keep it from, and I don't think any potential purchaser would be looking to acquire that building to use in the future because of the reasons why it was closed and the seismic issues. It would probably not have to be kept in the pristine condition. It's probably coming down for anybody who acquires it.
Trustee Schmidt.
I know that the community has said, maybe we could rent out space yet, or use it ourselves for other things. And I know that the reason why we got a new high school is because of the condition of that building and it's so bad. How would the ministry respond if the board said, maybe we'll rent it out? Or maybe we'll rent out space. Like, how would the ministry respond knowing that they gave us a new high school because of the condition of the current building?
I don't expect they would respond. That's board authority around the facility. You're asking them for permission to dispose of it. Part of the argument that we've made, the presentations that we made publicly were very transparent around the school's condition, the facility condition index, the deferred maintenance on the building, the seismic risk in the facility. So I believe the ministry would leave that decision with the board if you chose to withdraw it from the disposal process. But that's well within your realm. They might question, we'd probably get we might get a phone call, but we'd be able to easily explain it if it was to generate additional revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Trustee Lise.
So we now need to be looking at that third year now in all of the decisions that that we make. So do you see places where we should be, looking at what to do?
I think we can always be in budget discussions. I mean, part of the point of doing this work is so that we have a snapshot of what we think the future looks like, and we're making informed decisions. When you receive extra revenues, say, like I just brought you an increased surplus projection. So you could have said, well, let's spend it all before the end of the year. You still could, but now you know what the implications of that are. And I think as we just continue to move through amended budget processes, we always need to be thinking. The catch to all of this is when you have a surplus, you're doing that so you can long-term plan and have level service level across your 3 years. So you use your money wisely and you generate these surpluses. But then Treasury Board looks at school districts and goes, you have all this money, we're not going to give you any more money for inflation, why do you need it? Because you have all this money. And so there's two different perspectives on it. If you spend it all, you put yourself at risk. But you send a message to Treasury Board that we need more money, but then you're at risk in doing so. If you don't spend it, you send the message that we don't need the funding. So I think it's something that your trustees association are really looking to have the ministry and I think the ministry understand, but Treasury Board really understand why districts have surpluses. It's because we have unpredictable funding. And if you don't have a contingency, you can't plan ahead like we're trying to do here. So it's like, what do you do?
We do have a surplus policy that requires us to be with 1 to 3% surplus. So.
Yeah, and I think you're doing pretty well with staying in and around that, even with what we've shown you here on the surplus projection. You'll finish the year at a little over 3% of uncommitted surplus, and that is hopefully this is a projection. Yeah. But that's it's not a bad place to be. Because it does help you multi-year. If you were at the 1% mark, you would be into trouble next year. Yeah. So it's balancing that long-term planning piece with your surplus policy.
So as we go into budget for next year, and I know we're just finishing this year's, but as we go into budget for next year, should we be looking at, like, I don't know, revenue options, like going back to bus fees and things like that again? Like, should we be re-looking at that, or should we be having those conversations, or do we think that that'll just put our families in bigger hardship than they're already in?
Well, I think that's probably more of your question for the table. If you were to charge bus fees, you would lose $283,000 in revenue that you specifically have received from the ministry to not charge bus fees.
Then never mind.
So you would need to charge a lot of bus fees to offset that revenue, and that's that came in a number of years ago, and we have experienced 2 previous experiences of charging bus fees. Yes. It is extremely complex. It is difficult to collect. You're not going to not pick up a student on the side of the road in the morning if they haven't paid their fee. Yeah. We found that we had to move to fee waivers, which required proof of income, which then became quite intrusive into a family's situation. The collection rate was about 30 to 40%, and then you had to have staff to do it. And also put on the principals, vice principals to try to collect it from those families as well. So there's a lot of levels to it. It has to be pretty significant. Okay. You could review it, but it would have to be pretty significant. I know some school districts are looking at it. And,
they are.
And you can do it for out of catchment, but that piece was not really that large here. That component, like we didn't offset the staffing component that we needed to implement the system.
Okay. Thank you.
Just being cheeky, we could charge staff parking.
Oh, no.
I'm digging.
That comment's going to come back and get you.
No more cookies for you.
So I'll make my amendment to my date error. It is complicated software. And then we'll submit to the ministry. It doesn't need board approval. It's just that you've seen it, and we'll send it in.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We go on to revised admin procedures.
Thank you very much. There are 3 administrative procedures that we have worked on the staff level. The first one is use of personal digital devices. And this is definitely to update to align with the revised ministerial order M89, restrictions on student personal digital device use in schools. This had to be accomplished before July 1st, and it needs to be in place in August and sent to the ministry. So you'll see on page 26 that it's very clear that PDDs are not to be accessed or operated during regular scheduled hours of instruction or during any school-sponsored activity unless such use facilitates the learning activity and is authorized. So throughout the whole document, you will see that it can be used for educational purposes, but of course that is directed by the educators. So for those learners who may be in inclusive learning and they might need to use device, then of course they get to use it. And so you'll also see on number 8 as well that it is to be in line with our AP 104 District Code of Conduct. And so it will also be in each one of our school codes of conduct and at the district level and submitted to the ministry. So this has been revised to meet that mandate from the ministry. The second one, AP 301, student registration, enrollment, and placement. You will see that it has a number of revisions as well, and mainly there's 2 components that have had some revisions. Number 2 around student registration. And you'll see under 2.2 that it will now be expected that a birth certificate or other legally accepted document along with 2 documents to prove BC residency will be expected at time of registration so that we know that they're in their catchment area. And then in addition to that, under 4.5, you can see that we need to really incorporate Bill 40 with regard to First Nations preferred school of choice for their students living on reserve, and also that updating this in terms of student registration at the school sites. So it's specific to on-reserve students in terms of having that priority. So we had to update that as well. And then lastly, and certainly not least, this probably should have been updated a while ago, but we've been working on many of our APs, 360 around assessment, evaluation, and reporting, and it's to reflect the new BC Ministry of Education and Childcare student reporting policy. And so you'll see on page 34, under number 3 and number 4, that is, it is updated around communicating student learning K-9, as well as communicating student learning grades 10 to 12. So they have all been updated and ready to go out to the system for it to be activated. Any questions?
I have a question.
Oh, Eduardo, you first.
Thank you. It's more like a request. I'm just wondering, just like, the amended or revised policies we've looked at in the last few months, they've been redlined. I'm wondering moving forward if the APs that are sort of being brought forward in terms of revisions could also be redlined so we could see the changes.
We can look toward accomplishing that. I think it would depend on many things, and just policy is one thing. APs are the work of the educational staff. It may require a little bit more work. I would have to say, I'm going to say this, that when I started 5 years ago, we had 3 pages of APs that need to be revised. We are down to a half a page, but I can certainly look toward doing that. We'll see what we can do about that. Trustee Sousa, okay?
I would appreciate that. It just makes it easier to sort of review to see where the changes are. I get that it's the purview of education staff, but at least it helps in terms of reviewing material, just to kind of cut to the chase and get to the areas that are being changed. That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Cell phone policy or digital device, what do the teachers think of that and the principals?
I think generally speaking, we haven't done a survey or any feedback process that has been official with them. But I think overall, many of them had practices in place anyway. And so I think that when it came to somebody who had maybe a strong line on it, they already had practices in place that would say they'd collect them at the door. For those teachers who really saw an opportunity to use digital devices in terms of instruction, or saw maybe more value in kids being able to use their device to research, then I think it was a little bit more loose. So nothing formal at this point in time, and certainly no really strong feedback with regard to that.
Okay. Any other questions? Trustee Croft.
I have two, one for the registration and one for communicating student learning. Communicating student learning, so we went through sort of an ugly time where it seemed like people had to parents in particular had to access a lot of different platforms and stuff to find things, and if your kids were in 3 different. Is that settled out now?
Oh, good question. I think that it has, because we've been trying to narrow our platforms, and I think as soon as next year, we will be looking at MyEd specifically and only. And yes, and so it's been a bit of work, and I think that from the last 5 years, moving from many individual education plans through different platforms and different styles. So we have really started to streamline many of those processes. And I think it's a matter of us really looking at MyEd, what can it do for us overall? And so I know that the staff is currently working on all of that. Okay.
Thank you. And my second question, so when we're looking at registration priorities, and I understand that Bill 40 is key in terms of our looking at this. Of course, priority goes to First Nations school of choice for students on reserves. But then I noticed that in other groups, there's reference to siblings and that kind of thing. So we don't need that for the First Nations because they're on reserve?
Well, I think that when the nation prioritizes their school,
okay,
then it would be just, that would be given.
Right, okay.
And if you are a family who has a student who is from reserve, who doesn't actually agree with the school per se, but is out of their catchment area, they would have to go through a review process around safety.
Right. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Highlights of the May 21st, 2024 Advisory Committee meeting, Trustee Croft.
Thank you very much. We're coming up to the end of the year, so the committee shared a great many year-end events that included celebrating the end of the year and also just celebrating being a community and being together and lots of different gatherings and that kind of thing. The advisory committee also let us know that they appreciated the new protocols around long service recognition and the tea that we had, saying that was just right. In particular, they especially valued its brevity and the gifts. So that went over very well. In terms of truth and reconciliation, there's just so many to list. The Moose Hat campaign was featured, Red Dress Day, a big event out at Couch and Tribes, and a trip to Mallinicut. And also some examples of programming and just day-to-day stuff, and where a lot of young students are feeling quite comfortable and confident in learning and using Hulkamino. Generally, the committee supported the District Climate Action Framework and looking forward to seeing how it will be enacted. And for reasons noted earlier, we had to do another cookie vote. There were questions, the whole process was called into question, so we did that again, and in particular the DPAC parents were just enraged that we hadn't included the coconut crisp in the first vote, so Claire made a special trip and got us some coconut crisp. Then we got into the whole thing, is it chocolate chip coconut crisp or is it just a coconut crisp? You had to be there. So in any case, it was a good thing we did revisit the whole coconut crisp thing because it did win hands down. There we go. There were some suggestions as to how to further improve the democratic process when it comes to cookie voting, and the chair has taken that under advisement.
We're still waiting for Jeff's mom's cookies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 different chocolate chip cookies counted as 2 different categories.
Split the vote. Split the vote, yeah.
I'm sorry, through the chair to Mr. Sandquist. However, the students were in control of how that vote rolled out, and I think that you might not protest the fact that the student made the call. And you just need to go along with what the committee voted for.
You did say you had audited the results and
Yeah.
Actually audited the results.
That's it.
That's it. And with that, motion to adjourn, please. Trustee Schmidt, trustee Diaz, all in favor. Thank you very much. We will see you on Thursday.